Hello and welcome to the Tank Club. Today we have an exciting topic to explore. Can you tank in Star Wars: The Old Republic? We'll be delving deep into the aspect of the game, discussing its feasibility, the content, the enjoyment factor, and much more, analysing Star Wars: The Old Republic tanking. So let's jump right into it. To kick things off, let's address the fundamental question. Can you tank in Star Wars: The Old Republic? The short answer is simply yes. The game indeed offers tanking as a viable playstyle, but how does it work and what classes can be used for tanking? Star Wars: The Old Republic features 6 classes that can serve as tanks. However, there are only 3 different classes, as some of them are basically mirror classes. They are the exact same with just different skill names. There is the Guardian and the Juggernaut, which are mirror classes. You've got the Power Tech and Vanguard, and then you've also got the Shadow and Assassin. Each class comes with unique abilities, strengths, and playstyles, catering to various preferences. In future videos, we'll detail the best tank classes to use in Star Wars: The Old Republic. Tanking is something that you won't need for large portions of the game, as you do story mode content, overland, and questing, but tanks do play a valuable role in a variety of group content, such as master flashpoints, operations, and sometimes world bosses. Fortunately, when you are doing that solo content and the other content that doesn't require a tank, it only takes a simple button press to convert into a damage-orientated setup. But tanking in that group content is really important, and they really do play a very important role in the success of that content. So is tanking fun in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and how difficult is it? These are essential questions for any aspiring tank. Initially, the tanking experience is fun because Star Wars offers a very different feel to tanking, while also being similar to previous experiences in other MMOs. Swinging a lightsaber just has this fun and unique feel. A lot of the skills and animations are quite engaging and fun, and the initial playthrough of the content as a tank was fun to do and fun to learn. The most difficult part, if you are a new player to Star Wars: The Old Republic, is knowing which outposts to skip, which part of the flashpoints to skip, and how you do it. It's something that is quite frustrating, spending large portions of time in flashpoints skipping the content, but I also understand why it's necessary to do this, because flashpoints are so long that if you killed everything, most of these would take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to complete, which is just not reasonable. Tanking can be a little bit overwhelming at first because different abilities synergize with others, and you have like different meters to manage, such as the Force meter on a Guardian or the Heat meter on Power Tech. Trying to figure out the best way to rotate skills and priorities is one of the harder parts, and figuring out which of your passives and abilities work well and synergize together. The best way to do things is by joining guilds and making friends, especially for doing the harder content. It's a much better environment to learn, as some of the mechanics in the master flashpoints, and especially in operations, even story mode operations, do require some knowledge. People get very angry very quickly if you don't know what to do. This game is a 10-year-old game, so people expect you to know what to do already. Going through this content with friends and guildmates gives you the chance to learn and practice without the pressure and the stress of not knowing what you're doing and not annoying other players as well. So Star Wars: The Old Republic is a tab target combat system, so you can't effectively hold block or dodge, for example. Instead, you'll need to buff up your shields and absorb stats to reduce incoming damage, and your abilities run on various different cooldowns. You'll have to maintain aggro of enemies, but you'll need to do this by combining threat and high threat abilities with well-timed taunt skill usage alongside doing damage. As a tank, you rotate defensive cooldowns to protect your group, debuff bosses and buff yourself, but for large portions of fights, you're expected to deal relatively big amounts of DPS, even as a tank. In older content, the vast majority of it is quite basic and easy to understand. Your biggest requirement is to maintain aggro of bosses and just turn them away from your group. For the newer content, it's much more challenging, where the mechanics are less forgiving, you have a lot more to do, they require much more precise positioning and movement, and operations especially require really good knowledge from the tank to aid completion. As expected, when you're a tank, you have to deal with the brunt of the mechanics, and fight knowledge is really important. Star Wars: The Old Republic feels quite different compared to other MMORPGs. Obviously, it's based around the Star Wars IP, so wielding lightsabers and different tank weapons than you would usually see makes it feel vastly different. The game is also very story focused, even when doing group content. It's all revolving around some kind of story, and you're thrown into an ongoing scene from the story with every flashpoint, making them much different from your regular MMO dungeon type content and even raid content. This story driven style combined with tanking does offer an immersive and varied approach, but it does make things like really long sometimes, and you do have to progress through story periods, and it is quite different to most other scenes. Like, in a lot of other content, you can skip parts of the story, you don't have to pay attention, it's just a dungeon or a cave. Not in this game. The tanking style feels similar to other big MMOs such as World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, and playing Star Wars The Old Republic after both of these games makes the experience feel not as challenging, and a lot of the fundamentals between those games are very similar. I do feel though Star Wars The Old Republic is easier, as there's not quite the vast button bloat that you have in those other MMOs, and it feels a bit more dynamic and fast paced. It's quite easy to pick it up and learn, and you will find that a lot of your skills as well are things that you might only press once at the start of a fight or at a certain point when you're out of combat, and your actual in-combat tank-based rotation isn't quite as detailed as things like WoW and Final Fantasy. Compared with some MMOs, there isn't a huge variety in tank class options and tank choices. You basically have the 3 tank classes because they are mirrored classes. There isn't a huge variety in things that you can change and adjust to make tanking styles different. You basically have the same set of gear for all of the tank classes with just different weapons, tacticals and implants. So it's good that you don't have to grind out all these different gear sets, but at the same time, tanking doesn't feel like a huge amount of difference. There's not loads of different ways that you can go with, like, let's say, an evasive build, a face tanking build, a leeching kind of build. There's not like different varieties of builds. They all kind of play very restrictive within their kind of class, their specific class type and their class skills. So we have got a few little tips for aspiring tanks. Study your class. Understand the unique abilities and mechanics of your chosen tanking class. Learn how to effectively generate threat and how to manage your resources. Master positioning. So proper positioning is key to tanking success. Keep enemies faced away from your group to protect them from harm. Communication is crucial. Effective communication with your group is essential. Keep your team informed about your intentions and any adjustments to the plan. Don't be afraid to ask for help. The gear for tanking. You need to invest in gear that enhances your tanking abilities. Prioritize stats like defense, shield and absorb. It will vary slightly depending on your class. You might need a bit more shield, a bit more absorb, depending on which class you're playing. Practice patience. So tanking can be challenging, especially in group content. Don't get discouraged if you make mistakes. It's going to happen. Practice and patience will lead to improvement. Learn mechanics. So study boss mechanics in flashpoints and operations. Try and utilize any resources you can find externally from maybe YouTube videos or other players. You've got to understand encounter mechanics. It will help you anticipate and react to different threats and things that are happening. Use defensive cooldowns wisely. Each tanking class has defensive cooldowns. They are slightly different. You need to learn when to use them to mitigate damage during intense fights. Very, very important. You've got to stay aware, so keep a close eye on your surroundings. Be aware of your group's position, incoming attacks, and the debuffs that are applied to you. This situational awareness is crucial. Seek feedback. So especially if you are new to the game or new to tanking, don't hesitate to ask experienced players for advice and feedback, what you could have done better, what you did well, what you could improve on. Joining a guild or community can be immensely beneficial for learning and improving your tanking skills. Enjoy the journey. Tanking can be incredibly rewarding. Embrace the challenges, enjoy the feeling of being the protector of your group, and have fun on your tanking journeys. You've got to remember that tanking is a role that requires practice and dedication. It requires huge amounts of experience in no matter what game you play, but it can be incredibly rewarding both in terms of gameplay and the feeling that you get from just being that crucial part of the group. People always shy away from being a tank. They don't like the responsibility, and sometimes it just needs people to take hold, take the responsibility, take up on the role, and just do your best to thrive in that situation. So as we wrap up this exploration of tanking in Star Wars The Old Republic, we hope you have a clearer understanding of what it's like to be a tank in this really good game. It's a role filled with challenge, excitement, and strategic depth. Nowadays, the game is relatively straightforward for leveling and gear progression, so it doesn't require too much time to get into a position where you can begin tanking at a decent level, getting into that content, and starting to figure it all out. It is a lot of fun, and I definitely suggest you give it a try. Especially if you are into Star Wars and you like the Star Wars theme, this is definitely a game you should try out, and especially from the tank perspective. Thank you for joining us today on this journey through the galaxy of tanking in Star Wars The Old Republic. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more Star Wars The Old Republic tank content, you can check out my website, thetankclub.com, where we have some tank gear guides, tank builds, and other useful tank information that you might be interested in. Thank you to our YouTube members and patrons for your support. May the Force be with you, and happy tanking. Bye bye for now.